Now, when I look over at
now you're good. All right. All right. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk with Rev. Today we have none other than one of my most esteemed mentors, one who has helped me to see the light of this movement and guide me along my way, none other than the Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley. Doc, it is so good to be with you, and I'm happy that you are here with me today.
I feel so good being in the presence of one who is making such a major difference. A lot of people are talking a good game. A lot of people are sitting on webinars. A lot of people are caught up in a lot of talking, but you are on the forefront. And the reason I really like you, because you sing the song, I'm on the battlefield, but you stopped singing, I'm on the battlefield 10 years ago when you got in the battle. So yes, I'm glad to be in the battle with you today, my good friend, the Reverend Michael Malcolm.
Doc, I'm so happy. I'm so happy to be with you. Hey, listen, as I told you, I want to have some casual conversation, but I need it to be educational as well as entertaining, and who better than you to bring that. Today, we want to talk to the people about getting involved and give them a call to action on why they should get involved, why they should be involved in the climate crisis, but even more than that, why should they be involved in environmental justice and caring for the community?
You know, it's so good to be here, and the kind of question that you ask is very important as to why we should get involved in climate mitigation, climate crisis, climate change, when we've got so many other issues in our community. We've got police brutality, we've got poor education, inaccessibility to healthcare, but why should we get involved in climate change, particularly those in marginalized communities and communities of color? Well, that's about, I guess it's as simple. If I told you that cancer was coming into your entire home and you asked me, why should I get involved? Because it will kill you unless you go in a mode of prevention. And why should you get involved? If I tell you when you're driving down the street and you come to a curve in the road and it says, take this curve at 40, why should I take it at 40? I'll take it at 60. If you take it at 60, you're gonna kill yourself. All we're doing now in climate mitigation and climate change is first recognizing that this is a dangerous turn in our society. And if we're to survive and if we're to live, then we've got to make some changes in our lifestyle, our behavior. And by doing that, we've got to challenge the legislature so that people are not put below profits. And that's why it's so important for all of us to get involved. This whole thing around climate change, it is not a racial issue, even though people of color, marginalized communities suffer more and pollute the least, but this is an equal opportunity destroyer. Equal opportunity destroyer. Whether you're black, white, gay, lesbian, tall, short, there is, I don't remember the last time somebody said, I'm a flood and I think I'll just go in the black community. Or I think I'll just cause a hurricane over here in this part of the farm country. No, so we all have to be in this together, and we get in this together, Rev, by doing what you're doing now, enlightening people to get to a point where how do we come together across denominational lines, across faith lines, across racial lines, ethnic lines, gender lines. That's why it's so essential. And I guess the final word would be the reason you do it. If you want to be selfish, but be selfish for survival. It's about survival, and no one survives alone. No group can say, I'll do it over here with my group and we don't have to worry. No, we're all in this together.
Real, what was it that made you get involved? Well, you've been in this thing for a minute now.
Yeah, I've been in about 10 or 11 years. Of course, as you know, my background, mine was not, I could have cared less about a polar bear. I'd never had a barbecue polar bear sandwich. I didn't care about trees. There was trees around me. So why would I care about a polar bear? I don't even go in cold weather. But one day here in the city of Atlanta, there was a white woman that came to town and she wanted to work with teenage pregnancy girls in the Black community. And she was getting ready to talk to a large group of white evangelicals about teenage pregnancy and the prevention of pregnancy. They were accusing her of talking about abortion. That wasn't what she was saying. Let's change lifestyles. So somebody told this lady, if you're going to speak to this large group of white evangelicals and they're talking to you about childbirth, there's a guy in town named Durley. Why don't you take him with you? So she picked me up. I'd never met her, and we rode to this place. And when we got there, she was trying to explain to them about teenage pregnancy and the proliferation here in Atlanta. And they said, oh man, our lifestyles, we've got to tell what God did and what God said and all of this. So I was standing by the door just listening to all of it. And I was wondering why she was taking so much abuse from that group. So one of them looked at me and said, are you her bodyguard? Now, I don't know why she would call me the bodyguard, because I'm 6'4" and we're a little over 200 pounds, but he made that assumption and then made that assertion. And I said, no, but I could say what she's saying. But they said, well, do you have, what do you contribute? So I got ready to say something. And so one guy took the attitude, do you have a PowerPoint? And I guess he was being what he does. I said, yes, I do. Give me your PowerPoint before you speak. And Rev, this is what I did. I'm pointing to my power right now. And when I point to my power, it won't go down. I think you all are wrong for attacking this lady who's trying to come in here, and you're sitting up here. And at the end of it, they stood applauding, and the lady said, I want to introduce you to my husband. You spoke so emphatically. I said, ma'am, it's nice meeting you. I'm going back to the church. That turned me around. Her name was Jane Fonda. Her husband's name was Ted Turner. Next thing I knew, I was Sally Bingham. Next thing, Laura Seidel, Moms for Clean Air. And I'm saying, what is this? Then I began to understand that what we went through in 59 and 60, the civil rights movement, it was a constitutional right for us to have the right to vote, the right to buy where we could do. It was our constitutional right. Then I began to understand years later that it's our constitutional right for clean energy, clean water, toxic-free air. But yet and still, even though it was in the Constitution, we were being denied that. So once I got in and began to see how climate change and civil rights come together across faith, then that's when I became a devotee to making a difference in a perfectly balanced ecological world that God gave me, and I cannot treat it like a used car any longer.
Rev, that is, I mean, good gracious. Yeah, that's just awesome. You said something in that alluded to community and us caring for community. You talked about constitutions and us having a constitutional right to have clean air, clean water, a constitutional right to be able to live in peace and in harmony. With all that's going on, with all of the various instabilities in climate, instability in society, with police brutality, now with our voting rights being tampered with, what happens with our sense of urgency when it comes down to communities of faith? Because this is about caring for the other. What has happened to our sense of urgency around these issues?
Well, I think it varies from different community to community. The sense of urgency on the far right, their sense of urgency is real, because they said we got to move immediately and change these polls. We got to suppress this vote. So they're understanding the urgency because they're losing this power. When you think you're losing power, you have a sense of urgency. And so they're going full-fledged in terms of the voting suppression laws in the 19 to 20 states and improve. So the sense of urgency in our community is possibly overshadowed by so many other areas of urgency ahead of climate change. There are urgencies that when you are sitting trying to just get your child through educational system while they're sitting at home and they have no equipment to go and do it, there's urgency. When your son in the neighborhood has just been murdered and a lot of atrocities going on, that's a sense of urgency, fighting for justice, fighting for survival. So the urgency is there, but we're like number 7 or number 8 on the scale of urgency in our community. And until we can begin to get the visceral reaction in our community that one of the things that causes so much, if you take so much consternation, if you take a group of young people, put them in a small confined area, turn up the heat on them, give them no job, no education, you've got a violent situation. So if violence is at the top of the agenda at breaking news, then we got to move that agenda on up to say that a part of that is the climatic condition, the environment in which you live. You can take a well-meaning person, a good, solid Christian man who's been loyal to everything, and at the wrong time, put him in the room with a group of women that's doing certain things, and all of a sudden his priority begins to shift. So we got to work through the real issues in terms of what urgency, and that's a job that you've done such a great job doing, bringing that urgency to a level and connecting it to crime, connecting it to health, connecting it to education, connecting it to your mental stability in an insane world. And sometimes I've often said we got to be a little crazy sometimes. But you know what? I'm a little crazy. And the reason I'm a little crazy, because there's a country and western song that says, I may be a little crazy, but it keeps me from going insane. You don't want us to get insane. So we got to get crazy out here in what we do.
But you just talked about making those connections. And then you gave the example of putting a group of young people in a room and heating up that room with no resources. But that's exactly what's happening in our communities. When you look at the heat islands in our communities, and you look at the despair in our communities, then look at the high crime level, that's the connection. It makes the connection for you. And you will be able to have this sense of urgency and understanding. If we help these people, we can heal this planet. Now, I will say that, and you and I both walk in the same circles. We tend to tread on the same grounds when it comes down to this space. And we know that most of the times it's a predominantly white space. But we know that the future climate crisis is their concern. But our folk, Black, brown, indigenous folk, are hurting now. They're in it right now. The crisis is happening for them right now. When we look at that and we look at what we're doing as an environmental space, can you not see the racism in trying to disconnect the climate from the community?
Well, racism has always been around a privileged attitude, a privileged mentality. That belongs to me. I want to maintain it, and I will keep you in your subservient role. So if you want to say it's racial, yes, but it's around power. This country in a capitalist system is around power, and power is predicated upon how much money that you have, how much do you control. So consequently, you've got that element. So when you see that element beginning to work, for example, down there at one of the greatest examples is the 85-mile trek down there in Louisiana that we call Cancer Road, where all the petroleum companies are going down there. In St. Johns County, where all the lakes and all the rivers and all the pollution is going. That is a privileged mentality under the capitalist system, but it's racial because the poor people cannot afford to fight them. So consequently, it takes on racial overtone, but you cannot move until you move into slavery was around economics, around the cotton manufacturing. So you got to get back to America and pull that out. And in order to have a slave master relationship, you got to get back to the finances and the money and what controls that. Then you put in your laws. They write laws to keep control, voter suppression laws, or laws where a white business can go out of business. They give it Chapter 11 and give them money to start again. A minority goes out of business and they don't get back for 5 to 10 years because they're trying to pay off what they did not get written off under that law. So that's why it's so essential when you look at what it breaks out under economic disparities, which comes to the disenfranchisement of people from education, from healthcare, access to economics. And so then it does take on racial overtones. But in reality, a wildfire could care less what color you are. A wildfire could care less. An earthquake has never said, I think I'll shake this house up over here or on this side of town. No. So the climate, the way that God created it, God is not looking at this. He's much bigger than that. I think most faiths are much bigger than that. But then you will have even an element in particular faiths, maybe even in the Christian faith. But if you look at what motivates some of the elements in the Christian faith that challenges the reality of the climate crisis, you'll find that it has racial overtones. And there you started off by saying in many cases, we go to meetings and we're conspicuously absent. We meaning people of color, because we're not in the room when the decisions are made about who's gonna make the money around that. I hate to put it so mundanely, Rev, but it comes down to the reality of who is in control over what. Now, the facts are this, that now this is even bigger than racism, you know, because it's tearing up their communities. I mean, in certain sections, Paradise, California, Lou Gossett just moved here to Georgia, because in Fayetteville, because he said out there, all those homes were burning up in California, and those were not Black communities. So now we got to come back and we've got to join forces for equitable justice.
But Rev, if we keep looking at it and separating environmental justice from climate justice, if we keep separating environmental justice from environmentalism, we'll continue to lose.
Oh yeah.
We have yet to see the connection that you just spoke about as a whole. We have yet to see the connection that you just spoke about, in that we got wildfires all in California, but you got wildfires in Nebraska.
Yep.
And these, Nebraska, a whole lot of us in Nebraska.
But you said something. You said many of them are failing to see it. I think you said they just don't see it.
Right.
Let me add something to that, Rev. They see it, they don't accept it. Stevie Wonder can see this, they just don't accept it. So we can no longer give them the credibility of not seeing what's going on. These are not dumb individuals that are trying to be so suppressive in nature. They see it, they don't accept it. And the reason they don't accept it, because there's something that's acceptable better than what we see as acceptable.
But I think also they don't accept it because it isn't an inconvenience to them.
That's right. Oh, certainly. Yes, exactly right.
Yeah.
But they see it. So I used to say, they don't. Can you imagine somebody standing at a lynching and say, well, we don't see the disparity of somebody hanging and they're singing Amazing Grace while somebody's hanging from a tree.
Right.
So as Billie Holiday said, bitter fruit hanging from the branches. They see that, but they don't accept it. And when you don't accept it and you know it's wrong, you know what you do? You justify the behavior.
Can you give examples of where they justified their behavior?
January the 6th.
Okay.
They justified fighting for freedom as freedom fighters, and they were insurrectionists. But they justified it by following up on an untruth about a lie about an election, and they fueled that so much that they believed it. Now, here's the thing that frightens me, is that they see it, and then they convince themselves that they believe it, and they act on it, and they call it justice.
Wow. But that goes again to what you talked about with these misplaced priorities. We have prioritized our own convenience, our own comfort, over the sake of any and everything else, to the point where we are imploding. And as you said, we see it, but refuse to see it because we're comfortable. That's for us as communities of faith, and in particular us as Christians, that's totally countercultural to what our Christ was.
That's right.
And so when we look at the messages now, what do we do and how do we?
Well, one of the things, and you hit it, bring it back to the Christology of the theology, and every religion has the names just changed. There are certain immutable laws, If you throw a ball up in the sky and it comes down, no, that ain't nothing magic. That's an immutable law. It's called gravity. It was Galileo, they put it together. There are certain laws that are in place. And even in the faith, we're twisting those laws. We'll take something like a leopard can never change its stripe. Therefore, God put certain people here. And there's a curse of, what is it? Curse of Job, curse of one of the
curse of Ham.
Curse of Ham, and the color and all of those. So you take that and you build it up. And in reality, those were laws. Now, the laws that came down that God put in place, 9 of them, except for the Sabbath, 9 of them are good, they're solid laws, murder, that keep a community together, working together. They talked about health, they talked about faith and all that. And so when Christ came using the theology, he did not come and destroy those laws, but he came to fulfill those laws in Matthew the 17th chapter. I came not to fulfill, but the greatest law, the 2 laws that go over all of these, and this is what we're missing today. You know it, love your God and love your neighbor as yourself. So we've lost that. We've gone back and we've done the same thing that the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they took the old law and became so religious and put so many structures around it. And so the modern day clergy, in some instances, in some denomination, they can take that law and twist it all the way around. They misquote it, misdirect it, but they justify it by saying it comes out of the Bible. And so that's why we have to do the hermeneutics, or the bringing it to the reality of today. Jesus said, I came to fulfill, which meant love your neighbor, love as you love yourself. And if you're loving your neighbor and you're loving yourself, then you learn loving the environment that the neighbor has to live. Not, your neighbor cannot live in an environment that strangles them.
You know, Rev, that was a preacher that was getting ready to do a sermon, and he's preparing for the sermon, and he got to that scripture where Jesus says, upon this law, all the prophets hinge, you love God with all your heart and all your mind and all your soul, all your strength. And then it says, and love your neighbor as yourself. And he said to himself, I sure hope my neighbor is power. I sure hope my neighbor is money.
Yeah.
We have people in our congregations that are paying $700-800 light bills, and they're only bringing in $3,000, and it's 5 of them living in that house. How do we expect them to survive? How do we expect them to thrive in life when the system is set up to rob them of wealth? And we, as communities of faith, should be paying attention to this, because ultimately it affects us. Just imagine if that sister or that brother had more money in their pockets, they would give more to the church, and then the church could do more ministry. But we don't connect it like that. We don't look at it like that. We tend to, again, we also, and I'm talking about the Black church, are also addicted to power, also addicted to money. And so there's not only a need for us to do more, but there's a need for us to actually acknowledge where we are and repent from it. Again, when we look at the messages when we look at the messages in communities of faith, when I go to these marches, when I'm in community, real, if I was looking at us for guidance, it would be the last place I could look. I can you, Reverend Dr. Ambrose, Reverend Leo Woodbeard, Reverend Yearwood, there's Bishop Barber. There's a few of us out here that I can say that I know of that are talking the talk and doing what it takes to really move the needle. But Ray, how many preachers you know? God knows how many preachers I know. Why aren't we all having this conversation, being that this really directly affects us and directly affects our community?
I think different people have different opinions, but I think one global connecting mutual understanding is that this, I'm gonna say it in the colloquialism, what we're talking about won't preach. Some folks say that dog won't hunt. I did not come on Sunday morning with my brand new pair of Stacey Adams shoes and this new hat on, and the choir just sang, and you getting up here talking about the clouds and we got to cut back on what we recycle. I don't want to recycle nothing. I've been recycling since I was in the 9th grade. I wore recycled clothes, my hand-me-down. I finally got some money. I finally got my car, and you up here talking all this. Why don't you go tell the folks who using the money and all that to do it? Not me. And preacher said, that won't preach, man. Ain't nobody gonna come in here. And one of the things I got to do at my church, I got to pay some bills, and the way I'm gonna pay the bills is to give the people what they want. Now, I know I should give them what they need, and maybe now and then, if there's an Earth Day sermon, I'll do it. But I'm not gonna have a revival on Earth Day. That won't revive my people. My people need to know about this, that, this, what thus saith the Lord, and that you can make it and all of this. So therefore, when you talk about trying to excite, you talk about Leo and Ambrose and yourself, and even Marvin, Otis out there in Chicago and different ones, we're an anomaly. But guess what? This is something that carries me on, and I guess I can say it because I'm over 50 now. If all the people who claimed to march in 1960 with Dr. King really marched, we'd have taken over America. It was not until we got the Civil Rights Bill passed and all that, then everybody was marching. Everybody started getting the afro. They laughed at me when I wore African stuff, said, why am I walking around in my pajamas? Some people said, what's that nappy hair you got? Then all of a sudden in 68, we moved to a black nationalist position. But when we were fighting for civil and human and constitutional rights, we were a small group. The same way as I tell the environmentalists, you're a small group and many times underfunded, but that does not deter you from what we've got to do. So consequently, we're not gonna have that. And preachers are not going, let me bring it up. Can I bring it on home? Daddy King used to say, let me make it real clear. Let me make it real clear.
Don't bring it real.
He said, make it clear. He said, in 1984, and I was living in Washington, D.C., young preacher, and I did something that, oh man, they jumped on me about, they said, man, are you crazy? I did something crazy. I was willing to bury a black boy who had AIDS. We didn't know what AIDS was. That was a white homosexual disease. Don't bring nothing about no AIDS or HIV into our community. So consequently, when I became dean at the Morehouse School of Medicine, we were having workshops down there. You know, you and some of them down there about talking about AIDS and how it impacts. But brothers talking about, man, we can't use the communion cup because you'll get AIDS and all of this stuff. We had to begin to educate. But those of us who are out there talking about AIDS and how it's a disease that's really impacting us more than others who are passing through, we were an anomaly. So the same thing here now, we have to just stay on this message of how this climate change negatively impact. Now, under HIV/AIDS, then it finally came around. We started saying, wait a minute, this ain't no white male homosexual disease. This is killing us at a much higher rate than other people. Then we couldn't afford to get the kind of medicines to get the treatment. And again, once again, we had another catastrophe. So for us, we've got to connect that client and show. I'll tell you one thing I love about African Americans in particular. We know how to survive. We know how to survive, but we got to figure out, is this something that is challenging my level of survival? And right now, we don't see climate change as that. And if we do see it, we say it won't hit tomorrow. My bills are due tomorrow, next month. So I will, when it's really getting ready to hit, when my street is really getting ready to flood, when my house is really getting ready to be blown away, then I'm gonna get in here with you. Up to that point, I got other things to do. And the preachers simply say, that won't preach.
And Gerald, I went to the ITC, the Interdenominational Theological Center. I can preach anything, anywhere, for anybody. So that preacher that can't preach this, I'm gonna tell you to get your weight up.
Now there's a difference between can't. I didn't say won't. I said there's a difference between can't and won't.
I'm saying real. I listen. I done shouted folk on this.
Yeah.
You can shout folk on this.
Yeah.
This ain't hard preaching. You hitting them where they hurt. If you learn, ain't nobody gonna be upset when you start talking about the fact that folks taking your money out your pocket to keep your lights on, and it ain't right. Because everybody know that ain't right. It ain't okay for you to have to pay a $700 and $800 a month light bill. It's not okay for your water bill to be $200-300. It's not okay. You getting robbed without a pistol.
And that's a nice seminar, Rev. That's a nice seminar. Maybe we'll come on Wednesday night and listen to that. But on Sunday morning, when we all here, we don't want to hear that.
Nah, you talk about being on the battlefield. That'll preach. I don't know why they can't preach that. That'll preach. I done heard you preach.
You can answer that question. Why don't they preach it?
Because they don't want to take the time to learn. It's easier to get up and talk colloquialisms and easy to get up and retell stories than to actually take the time to find out what a people hurt and speak to their hurt. That takes time. Listen, I was pastoring a church, and because of the weight and the pull of this, and because of the time that's spent really putting in the work, it takes time. I had to stop pastoring. I had to make a choice. Either I'm gonna do this or I'm a pastor.
Right.
And when I got to the point where this called me to Lord louder than pastoring, I had to make that choice to go ahead and leave that alone and do this. And I
say what you just said. You had to make a choice to do this. You had to, what did you say? You made a choice between doing this and pastoring?
Yes.
They're not gonna give up pastoring. They're not gonna give up pastoring for this.
Yeah.
So you made a choice. That's what I said.
I agree.
You made a choice. They're not gonna give. I'm not gonna give up my church, not for this. And if I ain't gonna give it up, why should I get my people to give it up and cut into my income? Cut into. I got a building fund right now that I got to pay. I got 2 air conditioners I got to get fixed before summer comes. And you made a choice. You know why? You had a choice. You got the degrees, you got the intellect, you got the spiritual well-being, and you got the other side. So you made a choice. Now we're trying to say, you said, well, man, I can preach this. Yeah, because you chose to go over here and come back and preach it. In most cases, they made the choice. And the choice is I'm sticking, and look how I justify it. I'm sticking with the Lord. But they don't understand that the climate belongs to the Lord. So to make that connect, I'm gonna stay with the Lord. You going over there with, and if you challenge them, they'll say, you going over there with them infidels and them white folks and all that money. I'm gonna stay with our people and get us out of jail and get us to the hospital and get us to find. That's what I'm gonna do. Now you going over there with them tree huggers.
Well, before George Floyd died from that police putting his knee on his neck, he was already dying slowly from asthma. Before Eric Gardner was choked out by a police arms, he was already dying from asthma because of toxic pollutants in the air. Everybody ran in the streets when Eric Gardner died. Everybody ran in the streets when was killed. Everybody ran in the streets when George Floyd was killed. But the fact of the matter is they were being killed already from toxic pollution.
They were killed dramatically. The toxic pollution, to me and you, we see it on face up, but for them, that is not dramatic. That is not dramatic. And then the justice piece doesn't come in. When you got somebody with that knee on the neck, that is, see, we're in competition, for the preachers want to realize that we're in competition with the Atlanta Housewives. People watch the Atlanta Housewives before they'll watch us because it's got the real issues. My husband beat me up and all that. They don't want to hear that you can save your marriage if you all give your life to Christ and Jesus will make a difference. What? No, man, click next channel. And the same thing you start talking about, Eric. Now, if you seen had somebody pulled a lever and a flood opened up and it drowned George Floyd, then they say, oh, they pulled the lever that joins drowning. Now you've got a story. Now you've got something that you can exegete, if you will. But right now, that's the real, and most preachers, they know about it because I have to give the brothers and sisters in the clergy, particularly from finishing ITC, Howard, and other schools of divinity, are very well-read people. They're smart and they're sensitive, but they have to weigh that to make the decision that you had to make and others have to make. Do I go down that path? How do I want to proceed? If I go down the path of you all talking about the environment and that you can't move, I'll never get invited to do a revival. That's the reality of this. Until we can change the paradigm that this is, as you say, good preaching, because it's still talking about salvation. I think I told you the other day, I made up a word. I made up a word because I was trying to find a word that would get us. And so I said, you ought to run around here with the pandemic. And the pandemic is hitting everybody equally, just like the environment. But they said, all right, well, Merck and these others, we're going to give you a shot. Are we going to give you a mask? Are we going to give you a social distance? Or wash your hands for 30 seconds? They gave you a salvation plan to get through the pandemic. That's their salvation. But I believe there's a word I made up, and I don't know if it's real, called the climademic. Now, the climademic, there is no social distancing, there is no mask, there is no, so we got to prevent the climademic, which is more powerful than the pandemic. Now, how do you prevent the climademic? You prevent the climademic by changing of lifestyle, life messages, how we approach things, how we set things in order. That's changing the prevention of the climademic. How do we get it down to 1.5 Celsius? That's prevention. So everything we're talking about is prevention, but we got to connect it to show that it is more deadly than the pandemic. When South Sea islands are completely wiped out and gone right now in the South Sea, that's bigger than any pandemic, but the connection is not being made. So we got to keep an eye. Now, I don't know if it's a word, I don't know how, I have to work out how to spell climademic, but the climademic is much bigger, but we don't see it right now because the pandemic is on the news every night, on the night. But I believe that it's more and more legislative, more and more bodies are beginning to understand that this climate is much larger than what we see now. They're getting control through shots and other things with the pandemic. But can you imagine if the climademic just said, we got 104 hot days here in Georgia coming up. There is no, what's the antecedent to that? I don't know. The antibiotics, you stay in your house. You can't stay in the house if the air conditioner is gone because they used to call it a brownout.
Even more than that, Rev, you stay in the house and you running your AC, but if your house leaky and it hasn't been sealed, then you ain't doing nothing but cooling the outside and running your bill up. So
that's right. And you want me to seal my house, but you ain't give me no money to seal my house.
Right.
You want me to put a solar panel on my house, but that putting a solar panel, it won't pay off until 5 years from now. A church say you put a panel on your roof and you all can do your ministries. No.
But there was a couple of things you said just a minute ago. One, we competing with the housewives. I tell anybody, unfortunately, as society, we are driven by sensationalism. And therefore, I feel like it's going to take something extremely dramatic to get our attention about the climate crisis collectively. However, at the same time, I do want to give some hope in that over 75% of the population in America believes that climate change is real and believe that it's actually happening. Now, it's the implementation part that we're worried about. And again, IPCC has said that we have 3 years left. 3 years left.
Wait, I thought it was 10 years. I thought it was 10 years.
The recent report says 3 years left to make dramatic changes. 3. In essence, we don't have time to get it figured out.
No, you're right.
And we got to move.
But we don't.
Everybody have to do it collectively.
Who believes what you just said? I'm sitting out here at a beautiful restaurant and talking about 3 years. Yeah. And I used to see little cartoons. The world is going to end tomorrow, and everybody's laughing. People hear news. Let me give an example. I've heard this a long time. Speed kills. Speed kills. And people are doing 70 in a 55-mile zone. And they tried to do the same thing, but in another area, on the side of every pack of cigarettes, it said, tobacco is hazardous to your health. And the guy's reading it. Tobacco is possibly causing cancer, hazardous to yourself. He said, give me a carton. Give me a carton. He's seeing it. He believes it. But until you accept that belief that this is, and so people, and you say, in the IPCC report says, and you say 10, now it's down to 3, man, I'm living all right. And people did not realize that until they were sitting on the rooftop in Katrina. Then they say, this is real.
Well, you know, there's that saying that Rome burned while Nero fiddled.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
The same thing that's happening. We fiddling while our whole society is burning out.
But I feel a sense of optimism. I really do feel a sense of optimism from several points of view. The first point of view I saw after the George Floyd marches, I saw young people of all backgrounds coming together in Georgia and other places, really challenging their own parents when they're saying, don't go down there with all that violence. They said, no, we've got to do the right thing. This is wrong. I see that group coming into being as they're choosing their selection of what they're going to do with their lives. And then I see even in our political and in our overall, even the term around climate mitigation and bringing climate up, they throw it in there now. So it's subliminally starting to pick up. I mean, even I've heard people say to me, but they say it with a kind of and you too, they say, yeah, Rev, looks like what you were talking about 8 years ago, look like it's making sense now. you say, oh man, yeah, I remember when you were talking about this 6 years ago, talking about it's warming now. And I didn't realize until, man, I'm sweating myself to death. I lost my dad. It's all in it until it's unfortunate that it comes to this. And that's where we're headed now. And so I think the optimism is that we've got to stay not on the battlefield. I don't need any more people on the battlefield with me. I need some people in the battle with me. I see people all the time singing, I'm on the battlefield and don't even have a scratch. Don't have a mark. How you get in the battle and don't have a scratch? Never had a divorce, never been put out, never went bankrupt. If you're in the battle in America and you're black, you're gonna get a scratch, you're gonna get put out your house, you're gonna go to jail. That's in the battle. I'm on the battlefield. Don't sing that. Folks be singing, I'm on the battlefield, their wigs falling off, teeth falling out, talking about I'm on the battlefield. Never been in the battle. Now, they're on the battlefield, but they're 30 miles from the battle. We've got to now get in the battle.
I love that. Listen, we're getting ready to bounce on up out of here, Real. And any last words you want to leave to the people?
The word that I would leave is that it's time now. The future is now, and we've got to really get involved with it. What do you mean it doesn't cost you anything? I guess the thing I'd like to leave the listeners with, Rev, and yourself, is that there were two words that fueled us during the movement. People always ask me, how do I get excited and enthusiastic to talk now? And next month, on May 11th, I'll be 80 years old. And I'm still out here. And there are those in their 40s and 50s and 60s. Oh man, I ain't got to. I'm excited because two words fueled me during the civil rights movement. I think they're gonna have to fuel all of our members. And those two words were, we were willing to sacrifice and we were willing to risk. Most people are not willing to sacrifice anything, not even willing. And if you go up to somebody and say, we're having a meeting about climate change tonight, and they say, well, I got to go to my sorority meeting or my fraternity meeting. They're not willing to sacrifice an hour. I'd like to go, but I work for Georgia Power. They're not willing to risk their job. So I would say, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to risk? Because the future is now.
Rev, I appreciate you. You are a living legend in my book and will forever be so. I thank you for your mentorship. I thank you for all the connections you've made for me and put me in the circles that you put me in. And I certainly look forward to our continued journey together. Listen, for all those that are listening, you have heard the truth from the booth today. And we are grateful for Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley. We're grateful for you and grateful for you joining us and listening to us. As always, today I offer to you love, peace, and light.